Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. Excited to speak today about a couple of projects that are working in the encryption and privacy space. My name is Lisa Cuesta. I work at Aztec Network. We are building an encrypted Ethereum, and we launched a product called Aztec Connect as a stepping stone to our future fully decentralized network, which will allow private state and private contracts. So today I'm really excited to be joined by a couple of the leaders in the privacy and encryption space to talk about how this space is evolving, what trends they're excited about, what their projects are working on, trade-offs in the privacy space, and how they see this space evolving. So we'll kick off with introductions and just hear a little bit about what are your projects. First, your name, what's your project, what are you working on, and what is the specific thing that you guys are bringing to the table that's not currently available in the market?
Everybody, I'm Paul Brody. I'm the global blockchain leader at EY. We're the big accounting and professional services firm. We've built a couple things privacy-oriented. Two of them specifically, Nightfall. It's a ZK optimistic rollup. It's being deployed on Polygon and the mainnet. It's fully decentralized, completely public and open source, public domain. You can do transfers and payments in the system. You do need an enterprise SSL certificate to access it, though, to avoid, let's say, misuse. We're being a nice, well-regulated accounting firm. And we also have a tool called Starlight. And what Starlight does is it allows you to mark up a Solidity contract with the areas that you want private, and it will recompile it as a zero-knowledge circuit. And both of those are available at github.com/EYBlockchain.
Awesome. I'm Elena. I'm the CEO and founder of Ironfish. Ironfish is a layer 1 that only has private transactions. And we view Ironfish as the privacy platform for crypto assets. So we have custom private assets that would allow bridge operators to bridge assets from other chains onto Ironfish for privacy. So our goal is to make privacy accessible, easy to use, and safe. And we are pretty close to mainnet, so please check us out.
Mainnet is on Pi Day, I think. So check back in on March 14th. I'm Henry. I am the CEO and co-founder of Privy, and we build onboarding tools for Web3. The core premise of our product is that users are not wallets, and so building rich experiences for users online means taking in more than just on-chain data. We build wallet connectors, embedded wallets, and tooling that allows you as an app developer to onboard your users across the accounts that they have. And the sort of main contribution to privacy that we're working on is really the interfaces that power user control. It's one thing to have sort of an underlying stack that powers private transactions or private assets, but the question is, how does that then flow back to the user so they can actually decide who gets access to what? And we do a lot of work on the UX of, I would say, consent, basically, on the web.
Hey everyone, my name is Anthony DiPrinzio. I work on growth at Aleo. Aleo is a layer 1 blockchain that is enabling web developers to build private and programmable applications. Think programmability of Ethereum mixed with the privacy of something like Zcash. We have a ZK DSL called Leo, which abstracts away the complexities of building with zero knowledge, specifically the snarks construction. We also have our own virtual machine, a ZK VM. Many of you have probably heard of ZK EVMs, just drop the E. We built our own VM from the ground up. We also have our own operating system. And I think what we're enabling is developers to build more complex applications that are leveraging zero knowledge that you may not be able to build in certain other ecosystems. And this was the mindset that we had when we decided, again, to build everything from scratch.
Cool. So you just mentioned Zcash. I'd consider our projects all to be kind of second generation privacy projects and privacy protocols. What have we learned from our predecessors that we're incorporating into the way that you guys are building your projects? Do you want to start off since you mentioned Zcash?
Yeah, sure. So first, I'd just like to say Zcash is an amazing project. We've taken a ton of inspiration from them. And I think one of the great things about the Zcash project is they really introduced, I think, ZK to the mainstream. They've done so much, so much of the groundwork for what Aleo has built today. And I think the general idea is that for us, Zcash allowed for this idea of like private money, which is and it has amazing use cases and is a really cool concept. But what we wanted to do is essentially extend a lot of those properties from Zcash in such a way that you could create more programmable applications like maybe you would see on Ethereum. So for example, how can we build something like a private identity or authentication use case using Zk? How could we build games that have some kind of private state? And so essentially, it's essentially just trying to make it an extension of what Zcash had already laid the groundwork for.
I could follow up. So on the same vein, Ironfish would not be here without Zcash for many reasons. One, obviously, is the tech. I think they paved the way in a lot of ways for ZK tech to happen and still continue to do so to this day. And then the other point is regulation. I think Zcash paved the way for regulation to happen so that regulators are even aware that there are different types of privacy solutions. Not everything is Monero. And that there are different solutions for how you can do safe privacy. But in a similar way, Ironfish kind of took Zcash as a foundation, took a slightly different direction than Aleo did, which is how do we make Ironfish more of a privacy platform and have different assets, chains on Ironfish. But yeah, I think we're all kind of standing on shoulders of giants here.
Totally. And Paul, I'd be curious to get your perspective in terms of why you think privacy tech has taken a long time to get adoption, since you've been probably in this space longer than, why privacy has taken so long to get adoption?
It's hard. It's just really, really hard. All private blockchains are really a response to the lack of privacy because enterprises won't do anything if it's not private. But privacy is really hard, and the most successful con job I ever pulled was convincing my bosses at EY that $2 million a year invested in a bunch of mathematicians was a good investment. And we're only 5 years longer than I thought it was going to take for us to get there. But it's just really difficult. And when people look at it, if you're transacting ERC20s through an exchange, a mixer is fine, right? Or an exchange is fine. You have a lot of privacy. But if you're doing an enterprise transaction with complex logic and non-fungible assets, and I've got enterprise clients that want to mint 500,000 NFTs a day, each one for a serialized item. There's no privacy in that. You can follow those NFTs around all of Ethereum. So without a true privacy infrastructure built on real zero knowledge, the blockchain is just not useful for enterprises.
So it sounds like the tech just wasn't there. And yeah, Henry, go on.
I was just going to jump in and say, I think from the user perspective as well, maybe this is a hot take, I'm not sure, but privacy to me is less of a binary than it is a spectrum, and so enabling sort of selective disclosure by users. As a developer, it's very hard to know where to draw the line, and so it's much easier to engage in it as a binary, which is either we pick to go all in on privacy or not at all. Most people are picking not at all. And so I think as developers and as, I guess, infrastructure builders, building for better defaults, which takes some regulatory visibility, is one of the big unlocks that we're still missing. Meaning if I pick up and I just want to build an app and I would like it to be private, how can I pick easily what my definition of privacy for my app and the threat models that I operate under would be? And I think that's been a piece of the conversation that's been missing a little bit.
So that's an interesting point, because I think we are all making trade-offs every day when we're building the technology and building our commercialization strategy in terms of what users we're going after, what use cases we want to support. So I'd be curious to hear how you guys think about that. What is the thing that your team is optimizing for and not willing to sacrifice on?
Enterprise use cases. We're totally focused on enterprise cases.
So firstly, thank you, because I think a lot of people ask us why privacy, why does privacy matter? And I actually bring up why quite a bit of if you are in the non-crypto financial institution land, privacy is not just a want, it's a need. And so that's one example. For us, for Ironfish, we're thinking about responsible privacy. Again, how do you protect the consumer? How do you make sure that crypto users are not part of phishing attacks and scams? But also, how do you catch bad actors? And so one way we do that is through view keys. So we kind of take the stance that the protocol layer is kind of pure in the sense that it is private, but on the wallet level, you can disclose anything. So going back to the optional disclosure, because that's kind of how businesses operate in the non-crypto world today, and we're mimicking that for crypto assets as well.
Yeah, I think for us, what we want to enable is developers to make any kind of application that they can think of come to reality. And so our entire system is designed with this in mind. For example, you can have on-chain public state, and you can also have off-chain private state. And I think that's really important because it gives developers the optionality to decide, what do I want to have as being public and what do I want to have as being private? And I think that's a really important thing that we want to have in our system. I guess in terms of trade-offs, like with Aleo, people always say like, why are you developing your own programming language? Why do you have your own virtual machine? I think for us, there comes more complexity with that in terms of its design, but again, it enables you to do more complex things that maybe you otherwise wouldn't be able to do in other contexts. But sometimes that can be daunting for people. And for example, like Aleo has like a UTXO account hybrid model. And so people coming from the Ethereum ecosystem, for example, that maybe want to start using Aleo, that can be a tough mental model to sort of understand at first. But I think once you're able to conceptualize where it makes sense and the kinds of use cases that are enabled by building on Aleo, that drives interest. But I guess you can find some complexities there.
That is a really good transition to the next question around privacy is needed for some of these use cases, but there is a large barrier to entry in some ways. Like we're asking developers to change their mental models, to learn a new language. In the case of us, we're asking them to learn Noir. You guys are asking them to learn Leo, UTXO model versus what they're used to with Ethereum. How do you convince developers it's worth it?
So this is exactly why we built Starlight. We struggled so hard to teach our developers, and my first thought was, they're developers, they're engineers, they're really smart, there should be no problem. And they're like, wow, this is really difficult, it's not really what I signed up for. So that's why we said, okay, maybe the right answer is we need to make a transpiler so you mark up a Solidity contract and you can compile it into a zero-knowledge circuit. Because we learned the hard way, it is, that developer barrier to entry is really tough to surmount.
So for us, we kind of took the stance that let's solve one thing at a time. So transfers is important. How do we make just storing, swapping, transacting private assets and custom assets easy, and then kind of build up from there? Because right now, there's not even a go-to privacy solution for general, and so let's kind of take baby steps in terms of solving that first, and then moving on to more complex things.
Yeah, I think in our case, it's really meant looking at things from a sort of jobs to be done perspective. I think we're lucky to be a SaaS company, and we had a choice to make very early on of how do we actually build this out? What is the product? And I think being SaaS means we're literally asking for people for money in exchange for using our product, and so they want to know exactly what they're going to use it for from day one. It's an annoying forcing function because you have to build very specific stuff, but it's a very useful forcing function because you have to build very specific stuff. And so from us, it's been sort of, how do we shape the underlying architecture, the systems that we built so users remain in control of how they're sharing data across apps? But thereafter, the types of use cases we're really building for are ones that developers are coming in wanting to do in the first place.
Yeah, I think for us, the main thing has just been creating to convince people has been creating a really great user experience, both in terms of applications that we want to build in-house that people use, but then for developers, the way our programming language is designed. The Leo team at Aleo has put so much effort into making the syntax and everything just about the language super clean and nice. So even though you have to learn a new language, it's really easy to onboard into and just an amazing experience. I like to use myself as a case study. I'm not an engineer, but I learned how to program in Leo. So basically what I say to people is if I can do this and you're a web developer that already knows TypeScript or JavaScript, you should have no problem being able to come into our ecosystem. So I guess that's how we try to sell people. And then just showing the end applications themselves, here's something tangible that you can actually start using. And I think the proof is in the pudding in terms of what you can do with it.
Yeah, I think the best we can do is make it as easy as possible for developers to enter the space and continuously educate them. So for Ironfish, for instance, we want to make the full node experience really easy to use, and so anyone can install Ironfish today with just one command line tool, npm install -g Ironfish, and you're good to go.
Yeah, how many participants did you have in your recent ceremony?
It's still ongoing, so it's going to end March 3rd, and we have over 8,000 contributors right now, and people actually had to install the full Node SDK in order to participate. So we wanted to kind of test out how easy it was for that process to go, and I think we had like over 45,000 NPM installs that week that we launched. So we kind of proven our point that if you make it really easy for people to download the thing and to run the thing, then people will do it.
The docs are super beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Our designer is awesome, so shout out to Skylar.
Yeah, and that's another theme, right? It's how do you make what we're building accessible to folks? And thinking about the end user or the developer in some cases, and having empathy. I think that's like sometimes really challenging when you have this like really long development cycle in some cases. And so I'm curious how your teams manage with that and building that developer empathy and making sure that like the user is taken into consideration in how you're developing the product.
All of our engineers are in our Discord channel every single day. So actually Rohan's on the front row right now. He's an engineer at Ironfish, so he can tell you firsthand. We're all in there, and so we can actually see what users are saying. And the majority of the time, they're giving us really good feedback of like, hey, this is not working. And so engineers have like a really direct communication to the end user. And so you kind of have to build empathy because you're literally seeing them struggle, and then you make the product better.
That's awesome.
I think for us, it's come down to three things. One is dog fooding, so building with foreign systems, which is fairly, I think, common advice. The second is having a development partner that we actually work with, so either a developer or a company for every feature that we put out, who's very, very clearly driving, this is what I want, your solution works or doesn't work for it. And then the third is quite a bit creepier, and I was very against it up front, but we record every call that we have with folks that we work with, third parties. And that's turned out to be absolutely invaluable because I think there's sort of a wishful translation layer that happens when you're like, oh yeah, I spoke to whoever, and this is what they want, and you can kind of like graft your own ideas onto it very easily, even if you're well-meaning. And so I think actually having the core recordings, the source of truth being a snippet that you can cut from the recording to show everyone else on the team, this is what they want, this is what they said. And they're like, no, that's not what they said, this is what they said, has been super helpful in actually building empathy.
Yeah, so I agree with what everybody said here. I guess maybe one tangible thing is like through our grants program that we've run, part of the process is one, trying to help the developers that are putting together these ideas that they want to build out, figure out, okay, what is it that you can do today? Because like we're still in our test net and we still have a lot of things that we need to build out in order for us to be, 110% to where we want to be at mainnet launch. So a lot of it is helping them to scope out like, okay, here's tangibly like what you can do right now. This is how it's actually going to actively contribute to the ecosystem, right? And how you can get more people interested in what you're building, sort of creating this hype and interest around these project ideas. And then the other thing is internally, we usually have like regular calls or cadence with people building in our ecosystem, and we open up those calls to anybody on our team that wants to join. And we really highly encourage people to come to those calls, like sit in, maybe even like ask some questions. So you might have somebody from like our Leo engineering team, or you might have somebody from like the growth team, or you might have somebody from like the marketing team, and they all have like these different perspectives that can help a lot of these teams that are trying to build out their own projects, like better understand where the gaps are and how we can support them, and vice versa.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the grants program as a tool to like start building your community. I'm curious how you guys have thought about building your community and what role the community plays in your projects today, and then how you envision that expanding over time.
Well, we've got a couple things in mind, right? Number one, we want to reach out to the general Ethereum developer community, so that's a very big part of the community for us. We want to see other people. We've made our tools public domain and open source, so we want to be able to see other people build applications and infrastructure on top of that. And then we have our own very specific community inside of EY. We have 225,000 people who are doing audits, building stuff, and we need them to know about it. And it's still amazing to this day, like how many people inside of such a large firm don't know what we're doing, and you get these emails like, hey, are we doing like anything with this like blockchain thing? And I'm like, yes we are. But you need they are the people who are out there selling for you. And so you have all these different constituencies. You've got developers who are quite sophisticated, and then you've got people who their idea of developing is really just like touching a couple of APIs, and you got to make it ultra simple and accessible for them?
Yeah, so for us, our community is a lot different because we are a new layer 1 chain, and so we kind of had to build that from the ground up. So a lot of our people are people who are like full node operators or miners, or people who really care about decentralized networks and optimizations. So we kind of, we actually ran probably one of the longest test nets of over a year, and so we just completed our 3rd phase. And so, the way we grew our community was pretty unique. Like for our last testnet, we had 60,000 concurrent nodes online, which was like pretty incredible. And so, it also drives this kind of camaraderie within the team, but also within the community, because even in our testnet, we're facing scaling problems that some mainnets don't even face. And so, kind of how you think about building layer 1s, and especially ones that deal with your launch proofs and verification times and optimizations there, it's just like that level of complexity, I don't know, I think made the Ironfish community probably one of the more healthiest and welcoming communities that I've seen in crypto, which I'm pretty proud of.
Sorry, I'll rep Ironfish again. Just also very good engagement on the websites, and every way, you had leaderboards for the test nets and ways like that to actually build engagement super productively. I think for us, maybe bringing identity into the privacy conversation for just a second, a lot of identity is super nebulous because it's hard to define where it begins and ends. And so for us, building authentication tooling and wallet infrastructure, having a clear sense of where our stack begins and ends, so we can play really well with partners. So partner ecosystems that we think would benefit from integrating with us or vice versa, but sort of having a clear stop at this is where the interfaces will connect with these partners, so that we can build community with these other projects, as opposed to having an unclear line of this is your job, this is our job, and so on.
Yeah, I'll keep mine quick, but basically TLDR, the community, Alio's community is Alio. We're an open source project. Everybody who's contributing to Alio is part of the team from our perspective, and I think one of the main things we try to do is align all the different players in Alio's ecosystem. So we basically have application developers, right? They write, deploy applications. You have provers on our network, right? These are people that are actually running those applications and doing that by generating zero-knowledge proofs. And then you have validators that are contributing to consensus on the network. So it's really important that we align the incentives of all 3 of those players so that we can build a strong community.
Cool. Another thing that I think is kind of a misconception about the privacy and encryption space is that it's a space that's attracting bad actors, when in fact I think a lot of the developers and the end users that we talk to are asking us for tooling to be compliant and to make sure that they're adhering to regulation as it's evolving. And so I'm curious how you guys are thinking about embedding that into the protocol, or into the tooling that you offer to folks that are building with the protocol, to make sure that it's something that can be global and something that can evolve as the space is evolving.
So we made the decision we wanted to have enterprise identity, so you have to have an enterprise SSL certificate to access the Nightfall ZK rollup. However, and this was really, really important to us, enterprise SSL certificates are themselves a public and open standard, and you can get them from any SSL certificate provider. And that's super important to us to have privacy with identity and remain completely and fundamentally permissionless.
Yeah, so for us, we do that through view keys again. So the holder of view key can see the full transaction history, and we did actually amend the Sapien protocol to even give you more visibility in terms of where the funds are actually coming from. But yeah, I mean, we want to have Ironfish be used by good actors. None of us are working so hard so that Ironfish can be used by the human traffickers or the hackers of the world. And so we are putting a lot of effort into that. And I think everyone who's working in privacy genuinely wants to protect the consumer and protect crypto users. We're not building this for bad actors.
I think for us, it's meant targeting a couple of standards, so GDPR, CPRA, and actually picking where the lines today that we know we need to enable immediately, and then from there building a system that's flexible enough that basically as regulation evolves, we can continue to grow our system to play nice.
Yeah, so just quickly, we think the same way. So we're a private by default platform. That just basically means when you're writing in a program in Alio, everything by default is fully private, and then you're selectively deciding, okay, what's going to be public state and what's going to be private. And again, that allows us to evolve with regulation. So if we want to build an application for a government, we can be as compliant as we want to be, right? It's just, is the compliance going to be so tight that like what we're building doesn't make any sense, or is it going to be reasonable compliance, right? And that's maybe a trickier topic to navigate. But
yeah, I think it's on us as people in the ZK community to educate regulators on how this technology works and why it could be beneficial and the different use cases. And I think that people are open to that. Like, I think that they want to be educated on it. And so it's like our responsibility as builders in the space to kind of collaborate and make sure that we're like going with, a unified position in that. Cool. And a couple more questions as we're wrapping up. So what area of privacy do you wish you had more time to learn about?
This is a specific, I mentioned this on a panel I said yesterday, but an application of ZK is like ZK machine learning. I'm not a machine learning expert, but I've started diving into it, and it's really fascinating. So I wish that was a topic that I could be more of an expert on, but definitely trying to work my way through it.
I'm going to follow up on this, I guess, with differential privacy and bias in the space around machine learning models.
CKVMs.
Yeah.
Whatever the next panel is on.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.